All right. Hello, all. Last video for today, for me at least. I don't know if you're watching these all in one sitting. So I'm going to talk super briefly, like super briefly. I have like less than a page of notes on chapter 7, and then I'm going to show you the chapter 7 discussion post requirements and send you on your way. So in chapter 4, we talked about the importance of listening and how to assess source credibility, things to look out for as a listener, but it's also your responsibility ethically as a speaker to make sure that the information that you're presenting to your audience is credible, is sound. So chapter 7 is kind of the place where we can start to delve into research a little bit. And normally I would have y'all go to the library, and they do a really great job about showing you all of the different resources that you can use and ways to additionally or more effectively search for information. Unfortunately, that's not an option for many of you being online students, in addition to the fact that we are closed for COVID. So I do have a couple of tips and tricks that I will tell you at the end. So thinking about research, one of the pieces of the ethical guides of research, guidelines for research, is to allow sufficient time for research. And that's one of the first things that your textbook starts talking about is planning your time. You are much more likely, if you are at the end of your deadline, towards the end, to cut corners on research or to feel tempted to plagiarize if you are up against that deadline and worried about not making it. So give yourself enough time to engage in this process, because it's not one where you can just take the first 3, if there are 3 sources required, sources off of Google and move it along. This is something where you want to assess each source to determine if it's credible, because sometimes Google is not the best at determining if something is credible or not. So first, leaving yourself enough time to figure out, is this credible? Identifying things like who is an authority, who are the authorities on this topic, what are the latest developments on this topic, what are the impacts of this topic on the listeners. If the answer is there isn't one, we either need to dig deeper or we need to find a different topic. Okay. There are a couple different ways. The library is really great at showing you on their site how to save your research. There's always notes, obviously, but bookmarking tabs has been really helpful for me. You can also download copies of things as PDFs so that you have that to go back to later, rather than saying something, losing the citation, and then not being able to cite that later, or to help show people that you can verify that it is in fact credible. I have a Google Scholar hacks infographic, which when we go to the screen share in a second, I will show you. But it's a really great place to start as far as research. The library is also wonderful. Our library website is super helpful. And if it's not on Google Scholar, which I have another hack for that, then it's likely on our library website if you can't get access there. I want you to make sure that you're not only using popular media sources, things like on Google, like newspaper websites, that kind of thing, that you're also looking into academic sources like peer-reviewed journals. So there are people like me who spend lots and 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 lots of time getting a bachelor's degree and a master's degree and a PhD in 1 year. And then we go on to continue to do research and publish that research in journals. Those journals require that other people who are also experts in the field look at that research and determine if it is credible for you. So for the sheer fact that it is peer reviewed is an automatic, this is probably credible. You still want to dig a little bit deeper because a peer reviewed journal from, let's say, like the 1960s may not be as up to date, going back to those qualifications that I listed earlier. The latest developments may not have the latest developments in it, but it's a great place to start because somebody has already done a good chunk of the work for you to verify some credibility, and then you can continue to look through that. So most of the time you're going to be doing secondary types of research, have that secondary perspective, meaning somebody else has written an article about it, done lots of research, and you are going to cite them. If you would like to conduct your own interviews, totally fine. You have to give me the interviewees information, and I may verify if they were in fact interviewed. But I'm totally fine having you, let's say you're doing a speech on elephants, because I love elephants, and your parent is a zoologist. Rad! That's a type of expert in elephants. Let's interview them. Don't make it harder than it has to be, right? Don't search more than you have to. If you know people who can help you with that, phenomenal. Let's do it. And the textbook goes into more depth on how to schedule, prepare, conduct an interview, all that good stuff. But that's an option for you too if you want to do primary types of research. Make sure when you are assessing this research that you're looking at the authority. So does the author have any kind of credibility? What is their credibility? What are their credentials? Are their credentials verifiable? Can you go to, oftentimes with like news articles and things, you can go to their name will be highlighted and you can click on it and it will take you to their personal bio page, or you can copy their name into a Google search and type like LinkedIn, and their LinkedIn page will pop up and you can see what their education is, what their background is. If they are not an authority on the subject, you should not be citing them. That's kind of a hint for one of your discussion post questions is, let's say I'm writing a speech on the economics of small businesses. Am I credible as a communication scholar in that specific topic? Maybe not. I'm probably not an authority on that. I do have like almost a business degree before I swerved and did communication in my undergrad, but officially, not really, right? I have a little bit better than a basic person's knowledge of economics. So I'm probably not an authority on that topic. So you need to figure out if the author is an authority. If you can't find the author, that's also a problem. How do you know if whoever wrote it was an authority or not? You may have to look at the organization. Things like I use with what I do, the CDC, constantly. They never have authors, but they show at the bottom, the CDC has updated this information on this date, so I can start to look at, is this the latest information, and try to verify in other ways because I know that the organization is credible. So you may have to kind of try to find ways around it if you are missing pieces of information, which I'll talk about with the APA citations issue as well. Accuracy. Can you check this information against other information? So do you have multiple articles saying the same thing, or do you have conflicting perspectives? Is it something where people are not seeing eye to eye on this topic? How would you know if it's accurate if there are people who are both equal experts saying two different things? That's when we have to start looking into other things. And then objectivity. Is the source free from bias? How do you know? How do you know if someone is biased or not? Maybe like looking into the author's LinkedIn. Did they used to work for a company that they're now writing about in a newspaper? Or Is it something where you can figure out who owns the publisher? A lot of media conglomerates are owned by different companies that also own things like goods and products and services. So who paid for this information to be collected, for this research to be collected, for this article to be written? Would they have any kind of bias or agenda in putting out a specific perspective or a specific point of view? Probably, yeah. And then your textbook talks about the ethical guidelines for research. So I already talked about the first one, allowing sufficient time, investigating different perspectives. So even if you're talking about one point of view, it's always good to go research the other point of view. You can start to see what the other arguments are, and then you can plug some of the holes in your argument. Assessing credible sources of information, talked about kind of a little bit how to do that. I'll keep going. Never fabricating or distorting information. Fabricating obviously would be, I'm just making up a statistic, 98% of cats are jerks. I made that up, right? It's probably true, but I made it up. I can probably find some kind of other data that says the behavioral tendencies of cats, whatever. Distorting information is going to be you leaving out or taking information out of context. So somewhere, it might be in the persuasive speaking chapter, somewhere in one of my lectures, I show a picture of the Sex and the City characters and I crop out Samantha. And I just show that picture and I say, these humans are friends. And this other person, Samantha, the actress that plays Samantha, didn't even want to be interviewed for this because you can't see that she's actually sitting right next to them. That would be distorting information. I'm either altering the image or I'm only taking the beginning of the quote. It's definitely the persuasive speaking chapter now that I think about it, because I have a Brad Pitt quote too that I'll show you that. But you don't want to take just the first part, because the second part is really important. It gives the context for the first part of the quote, or the first part of the quote gives the context for the second part of the quote, right? So you don't want to cut quotes in a way that distorts the information just because it supports your point of view. You want to go find a different source of information that supports the claim that you're making. Taking careful notes on what you read, just good practice. Avoid plagiarism. So that's going to be things like forgetting to cite sources is plagiarism. Things like changing words here or there is plagiarism, that distortion of information, or like total fabrication additionally. And then citing your sources. That's going to be the biggest way that you can show that you've done the research, is every time you have a source, every time you have information that is not yours, you need to say something to the effect of, according to, or a study performed by, or an expert in the field of, la 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 la, and then give me the rest of the information, right? You can have way more oral citations than necessary, but any information that is not public knowledge, common knowledge, like we all know that the sky is blue, you don't have to cite that. People who are colorblind may not be able to experience it, but they know that the sky is blue. Anything that is not public knowledge, common knowledge, or your own information. So even like my own information, if I went out and did research, I would have to cite myself, which people who do that are often pretentious, but sometimes it's important if you're like in a very niche field. But sidebar, you need a citation, right? And that needs to be not only orally when I'm giving my speech, according to, or research shows, and then show me who the research is, not just research shows that protein shakes are good for you. Show me who did the research. How can I trust them? Why can I trust them? So that needs to be an oral citation, and it also needs to be a citation on your outline. So your outline will have a main point saying, recent research at Harvard University in the nutrition department shows that protein shakes are very good for you. Parentheses, Brockman, comma, 2020, close parentheses. And that's APA format. So I'm going to show you actually now. a little bit of how to access APA format and that really good Google hack. So let's share my screen. Okay. Oh, actually, let's do it this way. Because I do have it already for you. Helpful resources at the bottom. So I've got your APA 7th guide, which you are required to use APA format for your citations, both in your outlines. I don't know. Can I open this in a new tab, actually? Oh, there we go. There we go. So if you are not aware or familiar with APA, this link is super duper helpful. It will take you directly to the Purdue OWL handbook, which is like the authority on APA. There is a style introduction. Then if you click on the formatting and style guide, it's going to tell you things like in-text citations. How do I do that? They have kind of a funny citation machine up here, which I don't 100% hate, but make sure that you're also checking what comes out rather than just copy and pasting it, because oftentimes citation generators will be incorrect. But the fact that it's on the Purdue OWL website means something to me. So your citations may be like what I said earlier. Jones, 1998, this is the page number. If you have missing information, there is a missing information for APA citations link here as well. So let's say that you're trying to cite the APA guide, but there is no author for the APA guide. So what do I do if there's no author? If there's nothing, all pieces are present, this is what you do. If the author is missing, then you can substitute the title for the author and then provide the date and the source. Or if the date is missing, or if the title is missing. So this is a super helpful guide for you. There's also in this helpful information link, citing for images. So if you're trying to cite a picture, but there's also a news source credibility chart. So it shows, obviously, nothing is 100% free from bias, but there is a primary group of sources that are, for the most part, free of bias. So we've got things that are usually liberal, utter garbage conspiracy theories, and then we've got on this side, you can't see, conservative, utter garbage conspiracy theories, in the middle, mainstream, minimal bias, partisan wise, etc. A lot of the times this is where you want to stay. Sometimes you can go a little bit farther this way, sometimes you go a little bit farther this way. If you're giving me, let's say, Occupy Democrats, if you're giving me InfoWars, those are not credible sources. So you're not going to get credit. You're not going to get points for that. So try to stay in the area of, this is where it usually leans. Sometimes maybe Fox News, sometimes the Huffington Post. We want to question the bias, the implicit bias in those sources, who pays for them. That's when we can start to ask those additional questions up above and beyond, is this author credible? Is the organization credible, right? And I said I would show you the Google Hacks infographic. This thing is so cool. Cool for like nerds who like research and effective speeches, like your instructor. Go away. Okay. I wonder if it's not loading because it's in the this part, you all don't get to see. Yours does not do this. You should just be able to click it, and if it doesn't work, let me know. It may be because I'm asking for it to open in the page. Oh, weird. Well, let me move on, and I will try to find maybe just a PDF or a PNG or something of the image. There are different ways that you can search on Google that make things more effective. Things like putting search terms that you don't want to be separate in quotation marks next to each other. So let's say I'm doing communication, health communication, which is what I study. I don't want it to bring up results on just health or just communication, so I put health communication in quotes. Or when I do research, often I will put sex education in quotes. You can also do things like, I do primarily research on sex education in the South or the Mid-South, but oftentimes I will get results that say South Korea or South Sudan or other places, when primarily this research is going to be the South United States. So I can put the little minus dash symbol and Korea, or the minus dash symbol and Sudan, and it will remove any results that have those words in them too, which is super helpful. You can specifically look for date ranges, all that good stuff. So I'm going to find the infographic and make sure that that link is live because it's a super helpful way to make your life a little bit easier. Because if you can narrow the search results at the beginning when you're actually doing the search, it will help you to not have to weed through as much, right? So I also wanted to show you Google Scholar. Let's say, excuse me. So I can probably show you this. So sex education together, and I don't want it to say like South Korea. I just want it to say the South. So I'm gonna say South. So I still have Southern Taiwan popping up. United States may be they may be comparing the United States to Taiwan. So maybe I want to say also Taiwan, and you'll see that that took it away. Now it's giving me information on South Australia too. So this can start to get a little, like, if you're seeing it more, like here's South Australia, here's South Australia, here's South Australia. It's 3 times now. Maybe I want to add in Australia, and I can continue to take away pieces of that. You can also say, I never remember if there's a space in that. So if you type in site and then the organization's website, you can search primarily in that organization as well. So what I wanted to show you primarily, if you're using Google Scholar instead of regular Google, one, they're mostly going to be peer-reviewed articles and books, etc. 2, if you click this little quotation mark here, oh my gosh, it has the APA citation already done for you. Our library website, exact same thing. So that's an additional 3 points for using these kinds of sources over popular media sources, because it's less work that you have to do. You can literally copy paste these citations into your works cited references page without having to write the citation yourself, which is honestly amazing. Or if you have things like EndNote, RefWorks, I think RefWorks is what the library has. I have EndNote and use that often. You can download it directly into that citation keeper for you, which is super helpful. So that being said, now that we know how to do a little bit more research and we've got some tips and tricks and hacks, and we know that we're going to do it all ethically and none of us are going to plagiarize, let's look at your chapter 7 discussion post briefly, and then I will let you go. So chapter 7, you're assessing source credibility. It's kind of the same as the other one. You'll have one original post and one response. So first, you should copy questions 1, 2, 3, and 4 so that you don't have to put everything in, type it all out yourself. I want you to order the ethical guidelines from research that I talked about from 1 to 7. So 1 being least, 7 being most. So if I think that it's the most important to not plagiarize, to avoid plagiarizing where you got your information, etc., I'm going to put a 7 right here. If I think it's the least important to take careful notes on what you read, I'm going to put a 1 right here. So you may have to delete the lines and just put next to it in parentheses or whatever your ranking, and then I want you to tell me why you ranked it like that. Then you get to use more real world tangible examples of things that you might come across. So remember, you're giving an informational speech on gardening. It's topic specific. So discuss how you might determine if each of these sources are credible, 1 being most credible, 6 being least credible. So is your mom's blog credible on gardening? Is an article in Martha Stewart credible? Is a website by a gardening association credible? Is an advertisement for Miracle-Gro credible? I'm going to give you a hint. A lot of these are trick questions. So things like an interview with your economics professor, do they have a background in gardening? Interview with the school groundskeeper, did they start yesterday or have they been doing it for 10 years? Mom's blog, is your mom the president of her local gardening association or does she have 0 gardening experience? Martha Stewart, what do we know about Martha Stewart? Is her character credible? Is her magazine credible? What does it say? Gardening association website, can anybody make a website? How many people assess the gardening, or how many people are members of the gardening association? That kind of thing. So these are the questions that I want you to be asking when you're thinking, is this source credible? And then why did you select this order? So you'll answer all of those, should not take that long. And then I want you to respond to at least 1 student, 4 sentences in length, see the calendar for due dates, all that good stuff. You can click start a new thread, copy in, and then you should be able to reply after that. You can't reply first, you have to do it second. So remember, the chapter 4 and the chapter 7 individual posts should happen earlier in the week, and you can do the responses later in the week. I'm gonna stop sharing this now. So you should have everything that you need to get through this week. I am getting ready to jump into a meeting and then hopefully work on doing some more grading and some more schedule updates for you today, this afternoon, moving forward. So if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. Comments, concerns, all that good stuff. And I look forward to chatting with y'all again soon.